Welcome back to the second video in this series entitled Soulcentric Development, Finding the Truth at the Center of the Image You Were Born With. If you haven't watched the first video in the series, I recommend you jump back and take a look at that. However, this video will have a lot of standalone content that you'll find extremely valuable. In the first video, we talked about soul-centric development and used the soul-centric developmental wheel to sort of outline, to show and outline this path of soul-centric development and how we move through different life stages, what the tasks of those life stages are, and how we can incorporate that so we can continue in our development and maturation process so that we can become fully embodied and give our true unique soul gifts to the world in a way that's like holistic and integrated, not only in our communities but also with nature at large. And then in this video we're going to really dive into the self and the subpersonalities, and this is more for the day-to-day process. Like, how can you access the higher facets of self so that you can truly begin to heal your past traumas that can get in the way of your full soul-centric development process. And so, yeah, we're going to dive into the 4 facets of self. We're going to just dive into the subpersonalities, and we're going to show you here, we're going to give you a map for this so you can see where these 4 facets of self exist on the wheel. We're going to be using in this series a lot of the wheel that, you know, the east, the south, the west, and the north, so that we can begin to understand the different qualities as they appear. And the ultimate goal is that we can access and incorporate all 4 facets of self so that we can be truly whole and integrated, and only through that can we truly embody and start to shine out our soul as a unique archetype and occupy our unique niche and give our gifts to the world.
Yes, these 4 facets of the self, which have these archetypal qualities in these 4 quadrants. They're really the vehicle for our unique soul expression. And so understanding and really exploring, which we'll do more too in future videos, what these resources are of the self can help us be able to both attend to past trauma, past wounds that may be showing up in subpersonalities of the self, and also to step into our unique soul's way of drawing upon the resource that is found in each of these quadrants of the self.
Exactly. And you may have heard this term self used before, and it can be used differently from different places and different trains of thought in regards to psychology. How Bill Plotkin, who we are utilizing a lot of his information to share this with you, how he sort of looks at the self. The self are these universal divine archetypes. They're the parts of ourselves that we can birth from within that have a higher level of knowing, so we can overcome the parts that are holding us back. And we all have access to this. They're found in our ancient mythologies. They're found in our legends and stories. They're found in indigenous teachings. They're found in our religious studies. We can really see these everywhere, and they're really talked about as universal truths, which they are. So the whole goal is that we can access these, we can find these within ourselves, so we can really birth what saves us, right? So we don't have to look outside of ourselves, but we can really find these higher qualities within and begin to embody them, embody the true self in a way that's really like helping support community, that's providing gifts, and that's really sharing from a truly whole and integrated place.
Yeah, so in Bill Plotkin's work, he talks about this being an ecocentric, soul-centric, developmental framework. And so, as you're saying, just as the whole self is an integrated whole, that is also within this larger framework of the ecosystem being this integrated whole. And so the work that we're doing around identifying the wounded, fragmented, dissociated aspects of the self, which is named the subpersonalities in this body of work, is as we're kind of healing and attending to those and becoming more and more integrated and complete and coherent within ourselves, that also can be mirrored in larger ecocentric work around attending to the aspects of our natural world that maybe have been shunned or rejected, that need to also be attended to and healed and integrated and seen as essential sources of this interdependent whole that we all are blessed to be a part of on this earth.
Exactly. They have to be that these assets, these facets of self, are fundamentally ecocentric, right? So when you access them, you're not only connected to higher levels of knowing for yourself and for others, and can embody that and act in that way, but you're acting in right alignment with the larger than human community, the entire world, so that we can really, once we all begin to access this higher level of self and begin to provide our soul gifts to the world, everything flourishes, right? Everything flourishes. Our communities, our own personal lives, and also our broader ecosystem. And so that is a really good, I think you can hold and understand that what we're trying to uncover here and show you in regards to the self and its importance. Now, the subpersonalities, which we'll go into, and we're going to really quickly move around the wheel after we describe the subpersonalities and show you the different qualities of self and sort of their opposite, their counteracting subpersonalities, which block us from accessing those. But these subpersonalities, they're really formed in our childhood, and they're formed in ways to help protect us and keep us safe. And all of us have these, and they're really they become ingrained, and they become our default state of consciousness. And so it's really, this work is incredibly important. It's minute by minute, it's day by day, to be able to identify these subpersonalities, which are keeping us small, keeping us from accessing our higher selves, and then bringing the self to it in order to heal it. And so we can provide a lot of our internal healing and mirror and reflect to other people what state they may be operating from. And so we all have these subpersonalities because we're fundamentally raised, and if you were born or raised in Western society, you have these subpersonalities because our entire society is really a society of separation. It's a society of competition. Our stories that we tell create these subpersonalities and really like push them into the light as like as truths, but they're not. They're limited ways of being. And so our own personal lives create these subpersonalities through our traumas, through the way we were raised, and our society at large produces these subpersonalities. And they can be very subtle. They can also be very exaggerated. You can see them in others, and you can begin to uncover them within yourself. But it's incredibly important work so that we can access the self, which then we can fully access the soul, and then we can be truly living from the gift and expressing to the world. Yeah, exactly. And so, as you're saying there, these subpersonalities are birthed both through our lived experiences and also the social conditioning fabric of our modern Western paradigm times, in terms of the ways that different identities are conditioned and socialized across the identity spectrum, in terms which is so based on hierarchy of privileging certain bodies and lived experiences over others, which creates and furthers that myth of separation, that myth of scarcity of rights, scarcity of resource, and really creates these kind of group, smaller, fragmented ways of identification oftentimes, which is then mirrored
internally in terms of parts of ourselves that we may reject again, or we may not really be able to hold with loving compassion, and celebrate even as like our unique lived experience and our unique soul encounter with our particular body and background and framework for the world that is irreplaceable and actually is most needed in these times.
Definitely.
Like our particular flavor and experience and meaning making of life is what's needed in these times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's important to distinguish between the self, which has facets, which encompass a whole. The self is a whole. So these parts play with each other. They collaborate. You know, where the subpersonalities are fractures in our consciousness. And when we're in a subpersonality, we're in a limited plane of perspective. We have blinders on, and so the day before we might have been accessing some qualities of self, you know, and maybe we're the nurturative adult, and we're really giving and sharing and caring for someone from a place of true love, where you don't need anything in return, and we have access to that way of knowing. And then the next day, you know, we wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and suddenly we're in a subpersonality that's needy and that's grasping, and that's coming from a place of separation or a place of competition, you know. And so it's important to understand that, and to be compassionate with yourself, because when you're in subpersonalities, it's really hard to break yourself out in the moment. And so you have to like create practices for yourself where you can identify these, start working with them, working with others to help you identify them in yourself, so that we really can become whole. Because that's really what's being asked in these times, is integration, is collaboration. We experience the story of separation, and we can see the results not only in our own lives, but in society and the world at large, and the crises that are happening on so many scales. And in order to really heal that externally, we have to heal these things within ourselves. So we have to access the self, these facets of self, and we have to begin to heal our subpersonalities. So now we'll go into describing what these are. So we'll share a self quality, and then its corresponding subpersonalities, which are blocking us from accessing that. So let's go ahead and start, Alia, in the east here, and we'll show you this map. We'll bring this up for you. But yeah, start out there.
So in its full, mature, healthy expression, the East has attributes, as we talked about in the last video, of spirit, of a lot of connection and possibilities for feeling into universal kind of consciousness, universal love, the larger spiritual like realms that are available to all of us. So some of the archetypes that embody that in a full and healthy expression would be the sage, the priestess, the priest, the fool, the sacred fool, the innocent, the trickster. And so these are all attributes that offer a lot of gifts to others around them, because they have a connection to spirit that is a guiding force within them, and that helps break down or challenge some of the ways that in our incarnate physical material body and this plane of experience, we often can get very caught up in those ways of kind of seeing things on the material plane. And these attributes and these archetypes of the healthy, mature East are both beings and then ways of being in ourselves that can help remind us of like a much broader perspective connected to spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is like the sage, what that looks like and how I felt that in myself. Maybe in moments of chaos, the sage can be birthed from within to find stillness and presence. It's that place of meditation. It's the place of just pure being. Pure connecting to spirit. And so we can access these when we know them, when we begin to know them. We can access these in times when they're needed. We can share these gifts to others of peace, of pure peace in the East. You know, of it. The East is that place of spring. It's that place of like when you're the older elder heading towards death, or the new infant coming out of birth, where life suddenly has more meaning. The veil is thinner between this material realm and what's on the other side. And so there's more appreciation for the moment. You know, there's that play aspect of like, wow, it's not all so serious. I can just like be still. And so that's a quality of self that is incredibly valuable, one that we need to access and a need to incorporate in order for us to share our gifts. And what can block us from getting to that place, some subpersonalities that are seeking this part of self but are doing it in fractured ways, are how they can manifest are escapists and addicts. Another term may be bliss heads. So that's like a lot of like new age spirituality, just like I'm only spirit, everything else is illusion, and you know, like I'm just like pure light and just connected, but nothing actually practical is being moved into the world. That's sort of the bliss head. So we can see these subpersonalities play out, especially with massive amounts of addiction in our society. Disassociation oftentimes comes out of that.
Numbing out of that too. There's so many small and large ways that we see this playing out in our current society. With that desire or that knowing that there's a need to connect to something larger than the self, which is really one of the attributes of the East, there can be a way to try to commune with that without like a full integration into the material world of how to bring form to that in a way that's meaningful, and it's a delivery system of that truth.
Definitely.
And also with just everything that's going on in our current times, the crises, addiction and escapism, it can be a way to try to sort of have like a loophole or a way out of the material plane, because being conscious, especially as like sensitive beings, which so many of us are, it's so painful, it's so grief striking to be present in what is happening both individually and collectively.
It's really hard for us to find presence in this day and age, and so obviously addiction rises out of that, TV binging, all sorts of ways that we check out. And we'll dive into this, the East, the self, and the subpersonalities in more depth in another video. If that's an area that resonates with you, there can be a lot of value. Keep an eye out for that later on. So we're going to drop down now into the South. And the South is a place of embodiment. It's the place of the summer. So the sun is highest in the sky. There's a lot of play in the South. There's moving, feeling the sun. You know, it's that place of like fertility in the South. You know, the place of like, you know, the never-ending summer, like the endless summer of just abundance. You know, and so some of the self archetypes of the South, which is really, the South is very nature connected. It's very embodied. It's movement based. And so Plotkin calls an archetype of the South the wild indigenous one, the place of knowing and connection to nature. And so this is like being able to connect to animal spirits, you know, the eagle, the bear, the buffalo, the wolf, and be able to bring that into your body and mimic that and allow that to guide and help you. So there's a lot of really beautiful qualities in the South that we can embody as a self. So yeah, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, and so with like the ways that we're not necessarily taught how to manage our emotions or our sensations or have models of this wild indigenous one in our society, we've really separated ourselves so much from the natural world. There's a lot of fear around the natural world. There's a lot of unknown. There's a sense of humans being separate from the natural world, when the truth is, of course, that we're all from Earth. We're made up of Earth. We are Earth, interacting with herself through each other. There can be wounding that takes the form in the subpersonalities of this, of very like, the wounded child is the phrase that Plotkin uses, and that can take the form of sort of the orphan child, the victimized child, the kind of lost child, this sense of not having full trust in one's belonging to the larger, both human and then more than human world. And so kind of relying on oftentimes pretty emotionally laden strategies to try to get needs met, because there's not a trust that there is true belonging, and that needs and emotions can be communicated and heard and met in a way that can be trusted.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of separation in the subpersonality. All the subpersonalities are separations, but that orphan child, that wounded child, not having a place, not feeling safe in your environment.
Right.
So feeling scared of the natural world, not being able to move through it freely. Being like, I see this manifesting as like being stuck on a trail, like when you're out in nature and like scared to go off of that, you know, this sort of fear of like vulnerability. Yeah, and so it's really a place of that disconnection. And this manifests, I work a lot with the orphan child archetype, that really gets in the way of me moving freely in the world. It's something that I've struggled with, something I see come up a lot, this like wounded child aspect, this no one understands me maybe, or this separation from other people, or I'm like different from others, or like I just isolating myself in general. This can act out in emotional ways, so highly sensitive, overly sensitive, you know, overly emotional, overly dramatic, sort of temper tantrums that, you know, can come up in different ways here in this subpersonalities itself.
Right, because a real like distrust or inability to know how to hold and care for one's full experience, full expression, full vibrancy, can take on those forms of kind of taking it out on others, or not really understanding it in oneself, or separating from others because of a difficulty in being able to hold that full vibrancy and share that.
Pushing people away, right? So not accepting love or connection. And we'll talk more about how these manifest. So like where like in your childhood that might have come to be, or what circumstances that may have came to be. So you can unravel that and start to find peace and connection again, and start to really find that wild indigenous one that is just free in their environment. So now we're going to move into the West. And the West is really, I really like the West a lot. It's something that's
powerful.
The West is very powerful. It's the place of the sunset, lots of transition. West is the place of doing, you know, it's a place of seeking, it's a place of darkness, it's a place of mystery in the West. And there's so much wisdom. It's also this place of like the death that isn't death, right? Not the death in the East, but the sort of death of the old ego self, you know, the death of everything that isn't true, you know. So there's really a darkness here, or wow, there was just so much abundance of light, and now we're moving towards darkness. This is new. And so there's a lot of mystery in the West.
Yeah, this is the place too, in terms of the larger Soulcentric Development wheel. This is the place of kind of initiation. This is the place of that sense that there is more, that the soul is craving and yearning to bring forward, but not really knowing exactly how, because it looks different for each of us.
Right.
And so it's going a lot of times alone into the mystery, into the question, with that guiding sense, that truth that there is more to be found. There's something in the depths to be uncovered, and then to bring back and bring into the north of like sharing that with others in community. But in the West, there's a lot of unknown. There's this sense of dancing with the mystery, dancing with the beloved, the muse, the wanderer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you just said wanderer, and that's one of the archetypes of the West. You know, you also have the magician, you know, the person that works in mystery. Like, how did you do that? You know, the one that can like manifest things out of nowhere, you know, that sort of relishes in the chaos and finds order in the chaos and creation. A lot of artistic qualities here in the West. The soul guide, I also see this as the shaman, you know, the one that can access these mysterious dark realms and provide healing in that. The West is the place of finding soul, you know, so there's a lot of like soul discovery. The soul guide, the one that guides you into the descent in all the ancient stories, the one that takes you into the cave or guides you through the dark forest or takes you down to the depths of the ocean so you can find that pearl. It's so we all have the ability to be like, to enjoy that chaos.
Right.
You know, to find play, you know, and like magic in like the unknown. And so to be able to access that part of ourselves, which I see like missing a lot in society because we're primarily stuck in this southwest quadrant and we're scared to move into this soul initiation. And so we really need to find this access to this higher level of self. And so some of the shadow archetypes that can show up in here, when we have a lot of resistance to moving towards the soul or going towards the darkness, monsters can come up, right? So these like, when we're suppressing darkness and we're not looking at it, these shadow sides, it's really the monsters, the devils, even the gurus and the heroes. So why the gurus and the heroes that we talked about before is someone who claims guru, who like, I'm a guru or I'm the hero, you know, is really acting out of a subpersonality place because there's still a focus on self, is that I know something that you don't, and it's not fully incorporated.
Right. Yes. And on the other side of people who may be resistant to going into the shadow, another way that the subpersonality can show up is actually those maybe who go deeply into the shadow and don't know exactly how to bring back their lessons into the material, the communal world.
Exactly.
So there's some fracturing or fragmentation, kind of getting lost in that stage of the wanderer and the cocoon, and not necessarily knowing how to integrate those shadow experiences into the rest of the wheel and the rest of the soul-centric development. Right.
This is sort of like, not to like call anyone out here, but it's sort of like that like endless wanderer, or the lifelong traveler, the constant seeker, the one who's always seeking and can't rest in like somehow finding, you know, so they're stuck there.
Right.
So now we're gonna move into the north. The north is the place of winter. The north is the place of darkness, yet you become comfortable in the darkness, and now you're starting to work and manifest in the world, and you actually find pleasure in that work. You're not resistant to anymore. You're not resistant to harshness or cold or any of this, but you can embody these higher aspects of self, which are sort of like the elder, the leader, the teacher, the manifester, activist, parent, mentor, healer, king, queen. There's a lot of archetypes in the north. A lot of our ancient mythologies and stories talk about the north. They show that. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so this is the persistent one. This is the one that willingly sits in the midnight. This is the place of midnight, of darkness, as you said, but has embraced and become comfortable with that is working with mystery in a way that is like studying with mystery in a way that can bring forth form, can bring forth delivery systems that are meaningful, that are real, that are impactful to their communities and the larger, more than human community. Yeah, these are like true elders and true adults. These are the nurturing, generative adult that is within each of us, that has this deep desire to offer, to give, to show up, to express in a way that is not about the ego, is not about what we may get in return, but really comes from a place of knowing that the greatest joy that we could imagine is to give freely and in right relationship with earth and others in a way that is an offering truly and completely unattached.
Right. Absolutely.
To outcome.
And the north, I feel like there's such a pull right now, collectively, to embody the north. We need more adults, truly initiated adults, true divine kings and queens who aren't just seeking fame for themselves, but really gifting to the world, creating collaboration, creating community. We need to find this archetype in ourselves, and we have a lot of things that get in the way here in the subpersonalities. They're often entitled loyal soldiers, and these sort of, you can speak to this, you sort of resonate a lot with this, but there's also more in regards to rescuers, which are like codependents, people that act from maybe seemingly the north place, but there's a need for something in return. They're giving to someone else in order to feel good about themselves, or they're giving to someone else in order to receive something in return.
To feel connected.
There's a codependence in that place.
Definitely.
Yeah, pseudo warriors, right? Like These are tyrants or critical parents, people that like see themselves as an adult but then impose and sort of suppress others and want control over. That's another shadow archetype of the North, another sub-personality that can get in the way, sort of a dominating quality.
So thanks, Hayden. So yeah, that distinction too around like caretakers versus caregivers is one that I've heard described in terms of the North, whereas the caregiver is really offering from a place of a sense of abundance and nurturing and not needing anything in return, and really just a heart place, a heart presence. The caretaker, on the other hand, may be more of a sub-personality that's coming through that's related to the North, of actually really needing something in return, needing either like acceptance or connection or belonging, knowing that they're useful in some way. As you mentioned, there's definitely a lot of work that I continue to do in terms of the North quadrant. This is a place just for me that I'll go into more at a later date. But for me, in terms of how I found belonging, in a lot of ways, took the form of some of the more immature or younger versions of some of the North qualities. So literally naming myself helper at 4 years old. As a way of feeling in connection with my very chaotic and loving family, knowing at a very young age that being a helper and meeting the needs of my siblings and parents amidst that chaos was a way that I felt safe and connected and had like value in the family and was offering something. But as I've grown and matured and realized that there were ways that younger way of trying to embody the North was actually denying some of my own needs, I've tried to update and expand my framework around how to embody the North, which has, for me, looked like stepping more into this archetype of the warrior, in terms of knowing that my commitment to justice and my commitment to all beings having freedom and what they need to thrive doesn't need to come at the expense of sort of denying my own needs or my own truths.
Right.
So
yeah, like helper coming from the place of needing to find place or belonging as a child, and then as you get older, that sort of becomes like the helper can get really pushed around, and you just want to help everyone because you feel like that is what you offer, and so you can stretch earn your place, and so you can stretch yourself thin and avoid like yourself and your own needs. Where the warrior is self-determined, yet at the same time is putting his life on the line for the community, but doing it willingly, from this place of self-determination in a lot of ways. So there's a beautiful distinction there. And I would just say quickly, like, we can really see the sub-personalities in the North right now. I mean, they're everywhere in the political scene. Like, the rulers of our countries occupy the sub-personalities of the North. There's always an exchange. It's always like this war talk, this competition. I'll give you this if you give me that. And sort of backing off of your word in certain ways, or just trying to get votes. These ways of pretending to be someone who's got it all figured out, someone who's so wise and he's got all the solutions, yet at the same time excluding certain people, only including some, giving just to get. Those are sub-personalities of the North, and so they're obvious. They're everywhere. You can start to see them outside of yourself, and start to see them maybe in subtler ways inside. And then, like I said, we'll go into deep dive into each of these. They're all so important. But yeah, it's just a quick wrap up. We have the self, which are these higher divine qualities that we mentioned, which you'll see on this wheel that we'll put up on the screen, or we have several times already, that will show you the outside of the wheel is the self, the inside of the wheel is the sub-personalities. So take a look at that. We'll include a link to that resource as well. And stay tuned for more videos as we dive deeply into soul-centric development, so you can find the truth at the center of the image that you were born with, so you can occupy your specific niche in the world and give your gifts, so that we can collaborate and really heal what needs to be healed right now, and birth and grow what needs to be birthed and grown right now, so we can live in a world in which everyone has belonging, everyone has place, everyone has meaning, everyone has purpose.
Yes, beautifully said. Yes. Blessings, friends, and we'll be in touch. You'll see more of us soon. Safe journeys on your road.
Adios.